My name is Aria Blackwood, and I'm 28 years old. Last Sunday's family dinner was supposed to be just another routine gathering, but it became the moment that shattered everything I thought I knew about family loyalty. As I sat there, fork halfway to my mouth, my parents looked me dead in the eye and said those words that would haunt me forever. "You are a burden, we want to live without you." What they didn't know was that their cruel declaration would trigger a chain of events that would expose decades of lies, manipulation, and betrayal that ran so deep through our family tree that when the truth finally came out, it would destroy everything they had built on deception. Before we dive into this wild journey of family vengeance, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. It's amazing how these family drama stories connect people from all over the world. And if you're ready for a story that'll have you questioning everything you think you know about blood loyalty, smash that like button and hit subscribe, because this tale of justice served cold is about to get absolutely insane. Growing up as an only child in the Blackwood household in suburban Connecticut, I always felt like I was walking on eggshells. My parents, Margaret and Robert Blackwood, were pillars of our community. She was a respected pediatric nurse, he was a successful insurance broker. To the outside world, we looked like the perfect American family. White picket fence, two-car garage, annual Christmas cards with our forced smiles plastered across glossy cardstock. But behind closed doors, something was always off. My parents had this way of making me feel like everything was my fault. Bad grades, my fault for not trying hard enough. Good grades, I was showing off and making other kids feel bad. When I got into Yale on a partial scholarship instead of celebration, I got lectures about how expensive it would still be and how I should be more grateful for their sacrifices. I threw myself into my studies, graduating summa cum laude with a degree in journalism. I thought finally I'd make them proud. Instead, when I landed my dream job at a major news outlet in New York City, they complained about how far away I'd be living. When I got promoted to senior investigative reporter at 26, they found ways to diminish every achievement. The pattern was always the same. Nothing I did was ever good enough, but everything bad that happened was somehow connected to my presence in their lives. When Dad's business had a slow quarter, it was because he was stressed about my student loans. When Mom had to work extra shifts, it was because supporting my dreams was financially draining them. I started noticing other weird things too. Family photos around the house seemed strategically placed. Lots of pictures of my parents together, some with extended family but very few with me. And the ones that did include me felt forced, like I was photobombed into their perfect life. They had this habit of planning family events and forgetting to tell me until the last minute, then acting like I was being dramatic when I couldn't make it due to work commitments. The really strange part was how different they acted around other people's kids. I watched them light up around my cousins, remembering every detail of their lives, asking follow-up questions about their jobs, relationships, hobbies. With me, conversations felt like interviews where they were trying to find problems rather than connect. I started therapy 2 years ago, trying to understand why I always felt like I was disappointing them, no matter what I achieved. Dr. Chen helped me realize that this wasn't normal parent-child dynamics. She used phrases like emotional neglect and conditional love that made my stomach churn because they rang so true. The breaking point had been building for months. I'd been investigating a major corruption story involving insurance fraud, ironically right up my father's alley, and the stress was getting to me. I'd been working 80-hour weeks, barely sleeping, living on coffee and determination. When I finally cracked the case and my story went viral, leading to multiple arrests and policy changes, I thought maybe this would be the thing that finally made them proud. Instead, when I called to share the news, Mom's response was, "That's nice, dear. Your father and I were just talking about how we never see you anymore. You're so busy with your important career that you've forgotten about family." That Sunday dinner invitation felt like an olive branch. "Come home," Dad had said on the phone. "We want to talk about some things, clear the air." I actually thought we were going to have a breakthrough conversation. I prepared what I was going to say, how I was going to express my feelings about feeling undervalued while also acknowledging their concerns. I should have known better. The Blackwoods don't do emotional breakthrough conversations, they do ambushes. I arrived at my childhood home that Sunday evening with a bottle of Mom's favorite wine and a genuine desire to repair our relationship. The house looked exactly the same as it had for the past 15 years. Same beige walls, same family photos strategically avoiding me, same smell of Mom's lavender potpourri, mixed with Dad's pipe tobacco. Dinner started normally enough. Mom had made pot roast my supposed favorite, though I'd been vegetarian for 3 years and had told them multiple times. I ate around the meat, not wanting to start an argument before we'd even gotten to the clearing the air part of the evening. Dad dominated the conversation with stories about his golf game and complaints about his younger colleagues at work. Mom chimed in with neighborhood gossip and updates about relatives I barely knew. I tried to contribute by sharing some lighter stories from my job, but they responded with the same polite but distant interest they'd show a stranger at a dinner party. After we'd finished eating, Mom brought out coffee and store-bought pie. Not even the homemade apple pie she used to make when I was little. That's when the atmosphere shifted. Dad cleared his throat in that way that meant he was about to say something important, and Mom suddenly couldn't make eye contact with me. Aria, Dad began, his voice taking on that formal tone he used for difficult business conversations. Your mother and I have been doing a lot of thinking lately about our lives, our future, our retirement plans. I nodded, assuming this was going to be about them downsizing or moving to Florida like so many of their friends had done. We've realized, Mom continued, wringing her napkin in her hands, that we've been carrying a lot of stress and financial burden for a very long time. Your college loans, your car payments when you were starting out, helping you with your security deposit in New York. But I paid all of that back. I interrupted, confusion creeping into my voice. I've been financially independent for 4 years now. Dad held up his hand to stop me. The point is, we've been living our lives around your needs and your schedule for nearly 3 decades. We've put our own dreams and goals on hold to support you, and we're tired. The room felt like it was shrinking. This wasn't the conversation I'd prepared for. We want to travel, Mom added, her voice getting stronger. We want to sell this house and buy an RV and see the country. We want to live for ourselves for once, instead of always worrying about you and whether you're okay, and when you're going to visit and what you need from us. I stared at them, processing what they were saying. I don't understand. I haven't asked you for anything in years. I call once a week to check in. I visit when I can. That's exactly the problem. Dad cut me off. The obligation, the expectation that we'll always be here as your safety net. We love you, but we're tired of feeling responsible for your happiness. And then came the words that would replay in my head for days. You are a burden, we want to live without you. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom was staring at her coffee cup, Dad was looking out the window at the neighbor's yard, and I was sitting there feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. So what exactly are you saying? I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. We're saying we want to simplify our lives, Mom replied. No more weekly phone calls, no more visits, no more being your emotional support system. We want to cut ties and live our lives without the constant worry and responsibility of being parents. I felt something break inside me that I didn't even know could break. It wasn't just heartbreak. It was the complete shattering of every assumption I'd ever had about family, about unconditional love, about the bond between parents and children. You're disowning me, I said, and it wasn't a question. We're setting boundaries, Dad corrected, but we all knew what it really was. I stood up from the table on shaky legs, grabbed my purse, and walked toward the door. Neither of them tried to stop me or call me back. As I reached for the doorknob, I turned around one last time. You know what the funny thing is, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded? I actually came here tonight thinking we were going to work things out. I had this whole speech prepared about how much I love you, and how sorry I am that I haven't been the daughter you wanted. But I guess none of that matters now. And then I left driving home to my apartment in a daze, not knowing that this was just the beginning of a story that would expose secrets that would make their betrayal look like a minor offense. The next few days passed in a blur of shock and disbelief. I called in sick to work, something I'd never done unless I was actually dying, and spent my time alternating between crying, rage cleaning my apartment, and staring at the ceiling trying to process what had happened. By Thursday, the journalist in me started to kick in. Something about that dinner felt off beyond just the obvious cruelty. The timing was weird. Why now I'd been financially independent for years, our contact had actually decreased recently due to my work schedule, and they'd never expressed these feelings before. It felt rehearsed, like they'd practiced what they were going to say. I started thinking about the strange dynamics I'd noticed over the years. The lack of baby photos of me compared to my cousins. The way extended family members sometimes looked uncomfortable when my parents talked about my childhood. The fact that I looked absolutely nothing like either of my parents. I had dark hair and green eyes while they were both blonde with blue eyes, but I'd always assumed I took after some distant relative. Friday evening, I found myself digging through old documents in my filing cabinet looking for, I wasn't sure what. Birth certificates, social security card, passport applications. Everything seemed normal at first glance, but then I noticed something odd about my birth certificate. The paper felt different from other official documents I had from around the same time, and there was a slight color variation that was almost imperceptible. That's when my investigative training really kicked in. I'd exposed document fraud before in my journalism work. I knew what to look for. I took high-resolution photos of my birth certificate and compared them to images of legitimate Connecticut birth certificates from 1995. The fonts were slightly different. The spacing was off. The paper stock was wrong. My birth certificate was a fake. Saturday morning, I drove to the Connecticut Department of Health and requested a certified copy of my birth certificate directly from their records. The clerk was helpful but confused when she couldn't find any record of an Aria Blackwood born on my supposed birthday in 1995. "Are you sure about the date?" she asked. "Sometimes parents misremember, especially if there were complications. We tried variations, different months, different years, different hospitals. Nothing." According to the state of Connecticut, Aria Blackwood had never been born. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes, hands shaking as I tried to process this information. Either there had been some massive clerical error that had somehow never been caught in 28 years, or Margaret and Robert Blackwood were not my biological parents and had been lying to me my entire life. That afternoon, I did something I never thought I'd do. I hired a private investigator. Sarah Martinez came, highly recommended and specialized in adoption and family history cases. When I explained my situation, she didn't seem surprised. "You'd be amazed how often this happens," she said. "Illegal adoptions forge documents, parents who thought they were protecting children by hiding the truth. The good news is, if you're willing to do the work, we can usually figure out what really happened." Sarah started by running background checks on Margaret and Robert Blackwood. What she found made my blood run cold. In 1994, a year before I was supposedly born, they had been trying to adopt through official channels. Their application had been rejected due to Margaret's undisclosed history of severe postpartum depression following 2 miscarriages and Robert's financial instability at the time. "This is just the beginning," Sarah warned me. "Are you sure you want to keep digging? Sometimes the truth is harder to live with than the lies." I thought about my parents' words from Sunday dinner. How I was a burden, how they wanted to live without me. If they'd been lying about my very existence my entire life, then their rejection made a sick kind of sense. I wasn't their daughter they were tired of supporting. I was a reminder of whatever illegal thing they'd done to get me. Keep digging, I told Sarah. I want to know everything. The next week was a master class in how quickly your entire reality can crumble. Sarah's contacts in various agencies started pulling threads that led to bigger threads, hospital records that didn't match, social workers who remembered suspicious cases, a pattern of private adoption facilitators who had operated in gray areas of the law during the 1990 seconds. And then Sarah called me with the big break. I found something, she said, her voice tight with excitement, and something else, maybe concern. There was a case in 1995, a young woman who disappeared after giving birth at a private clinic. The baby disappeared too. The police investigated it as a potential kidnapping, but the case went cold when they couldn't find any leads. She paused, and I could hear papers rustling on her end of the phone. Aria, the baby's description, matches you exactly. Birth weight, estimated due date, distinctive birthmark on the left shoulder blade. I unconsciously reached back to touch the small crescent-shaped mark on my shoulder that I'd always been told was from a childhood accident. What happened to the mother, I asked, though part of me already knew the answer was going to change everything. That's where it gets complicated, Sarah said. The mother's name was Elena Vasquez. She was 19, unmarried, and according to the case file she was planning to keep the baby. She'd been working with a social worker to set up support services, had already picked out a name, had baby supplies ready in her apartment. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear her. She went into labor 2 weeks early and was taken to a private clinic instead of the hospital where she'd been planning to deliver. After the birth, both she and the baby vanished. The clinic claimed there were complications and that both mother and child had died, but they couldn't produce bodies or proper death certificates. Where is she now? I whispered. I don't know yet, Sarah admitted. But Aria, if this is what I think it is, your parents didn't just lie to you about being adopted. They might have been accessories to kidnapping. That's when everything clicked into place. The guilt I'd always sensed from them, the way they acted like I was a burden rather than a blessing, the lack of baby photos, the discomfort around extended family, the sudden desire to cut ties with me. They weren't tired of being my parents. They were terrified that after 28 years their crime was finally going to catch up with them. And they had no idea that by rejecting me so cruelly, they'd set in motion the very investigation that would expose everything they'd spent decades hiding. But I wasn't done yet. If Elena Vasquez was still alive, if she'd spent 28 years wondering what happened to her stolen baby, then she deserved to know the truth. And Margaret and Robert Blackwood deserved to face the consequences of what they'd done. The real investigation was just beginning. Sarah and I spent the next 2 weeks diving deeper into Elena Vasquez's case. What we discovered was a web of corruption that extended far beyond one stolen baby. The private clinic where I was allegedly born had been operating what amounted to an illegal adoption ring, targeting vulnerable pregnant women and facilitating black market baby sales to couples who couldn't qualify for legitimate adoptions. The clinic, run by a Dr. Marcus Webb, had operated from 1992 to 1998, before being shut down following a federal investigation. Dr. Webb had served 5 years in prison for fraud and conspiracy, but most of his clients, both the birth mothers and adoptive parents, had never been identified or prosecuted. Margaret and Robert Blackwood had paid $75 0 inches, $1,995, for a healthy infant with forged documents. The money trail was still there, buried in old bank records that Sarah's contacts helped us access. They'd liquidated Robert's retirement account and taken out a second mortgage on their house to pay for me. But the most devastating discovery came when Sarah located Elena Vasquez. She was alive. She'd been alive this entire time, living just 2 states away in Massachusetts, working as a teacher, and raising 2 other children she'd had later in life. She'd never stopped looking for her first baby, the daughter she'd named Isabella, but who'd been stolen from her arms at that clinic 28 years ago. Sarah arranged a meeting and I drove to Elena's house on a rainy Saturday morning with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. When the door opened, I found myself looking at a woman who shared my dark hair, my green eyes, and my stubborn chin. There was no question. This was my mother. Elena took one look at me and burst into tears. "Isabella," she whispered. And then she was hugging me and I was crying too, because for the first time in my life someone was looking at me like I was a miracle instead of a burden. Over coffee in her cozy kitchen, Elena told me her story. She'd been a college student when she got pregnant, planning to raise me as a single mother with support from her family. The clinic had been recommended by a social worker she trusted, a woman who we later learned was receiving kickbacks for steering vulnerable women toward Dr. Webb's operation. "They told me you died during delivery," Elena said, tears streaming down her face. "They said there were complications, that your heart stopped. They wouldn't let me hold you, said it would be too traumatic. I begged them to let me see you, but they said it was better this way." She'd grieved for months, blaming herself for not being able to save me. She'd had a memorial service with an empty casket. She'd named the star she'd bought in my memory Isabella, after the name she'd chosen for me. "I never stopped believing something was wrong," she continued. "The whole thing felt off. They rushed me out of there so fast, wouldn't give me proper medical records, claimed there was a fire that destroyed all the documents. But I was 19 and scared, and everyone kept telling me I needed to move on. The most heartbreaking part was what came next." Elena had hired private investigators 3 times over the years, spending money she couldn't afford trying to find out what really happened to me. Each investigation had hit dead ends, blocked by the wall of false documents and corrupted officials who'd covered their tracks. "I have a box upstairs," she said quietly. "Pictures of what you would have looked like at different ages, birthday cards I wrote but never sent, Christmas presents I bought every year, until you would have turned 18, I couldn't let go. My biological mother had been mourning me for 28 years while my adoptive parents had been treating me like an inconvenience." Elena introduced me to my half-siblings, Maria 23, and David 20. They'd grown up hearing stories about their older sister who'd died before they were born. Elena had never hidden my existence from them. She'd just been told I was dead. Meeting them was surreal and wonderful and heartbreaking all at once. Maria looked like a younger version of me and David had my same nervous laugh. They welcomed me with an openness and joy that stood in stark contrast to the cold rejection I'd experienced from the Blackwoods. "We always wondered," Maria admitted. "Mom would get so sad around your birthday every year, and she kept saying she felt like something was missing. It's like we always knew there should be another person in our family." That evening, as I drove back to Connecticut, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Joy at finding my real family, rage at what had been stolen from all of us, and a burning desire for justice. Elena had lost 28 years with her firstborn daughter. I'd grown up feeling unloved and unwanted when I had a mother who'd been grieving me as dead. The Blackwoods had built their entire life on a foundation of lies and stolen moments. But I wasn't just angry anymore, I was determined. Sarah had been busy while I was in Massachusetts. She'd tracked down 3 other families who'd been victims of Dr. Webb's operation. The pattern was always the same. Vulnerable birth mothers told their babies had died, desperate adoptive parents paying huge sums for falsified documents, and children growing up never knowing their true identities. "The statute of limitations hasn't run out," Sarah informed me. "Kidnapping has no statute of limitations in Connecticut, and conspiracy charges can be filed within 10 years of discovery of the crime. We have enough evidence to build a case." I thought about Margaret and Robert probably planning their RV trips and congratulating themselves on finally being free of their burden. They had no idea that their carefully constructed lie was about to collapse around them. Elena deserved justice. The other families deserved justice. I deserved justice. It was time to make some phone calls. The next month was a whirlwind of meetings with prosecutors, FBI agents, and other victims of Dr. Webb's adoption ring. What had started as my personal quest for answers had snowballed into a major federal investigation into what authorities were calling one of the largest baby trafficking operations of the 1992. The case gained momentum quickly once law enforcement got involved. Sarah's research had provided the initial roadmap, but federal investigators had resources we couldn't access. They found financial records, intercepted communications, and witness testimony that painted a picture of a sophisticated criminal enterprise. Dr. Marcus Webb, now in his 70s and living in Florida, was arrested again. This time the charges were far more serious: conspiracy, kidnapping, fraud, and racketeering. During his interrogation, he gave up names of dozens of accomplices, including social workers, clinic staff, and lawyers who'd facilitated the illegal adoptions. The social worker who'd steered Elena to the clinic was found living in Arizona under an assumed name. She'd been taking payments of $5,000 per referral and had directed over 40 pregnant women to Dr. Webb's operation. When faced with federal charges, she agreed to cooperate fully with prosecutors. But the most satisfying moment came when FBI agents knocked on Margaret and Robert Blackwood's door early one Tuesday morning. I wasn't there, obviously, but Sarah had contacts in the investigation who kept me informed. According to the agent's report, Margaret answered the door in her bathrobe and immediately went pale when they showed their badges and mentioned my name. "We'd like to ask you some questions about the adoption of Aria Blackwood in 1995, the lead agent had said. Robert had tried to play dumb, claiming they'd adopted me through legitimate channels and had all the proper paperwork. But when agents asked to see the original adoption decree and other legal documents, the Blackwoods couldn't produce them because they'd never existed. The fake birth certificate I discovered was just the tip of the iceberg. Everything about my legal identity had been manufactured: social security records, vaccination records, school enrollment documents. For 28 years, Margaret and Robert had been maintaining an elaborate lie that required constant vigilance and occasional document forgery. During the search of their house, agents found a safety deposit box key hidden behind a false back in Robert's desk drawer. The box contained the smoking gun, original correspondence with Dr. Webb's clinic, payment receipts, and a folder labeled A, B, that contained instructions for maintaining my false identity. Most damning was a letter from Dr. Webb dated 3 months after my birth, reminding the Blackwoods that their confidentiality agreement was permanent and that any attempt to research my background or contact the clinic would result in severe consequences. The letter also contained a detail that made my blood run cold. The birth mother continues to ask questions about the child's death. We've told her the records were destroyed in a fire, but she remains suspicious. It's crucial that A, B, never attempts to trace her origins, as this could expose the entire operation. They'd known. From the very beginning, Margaret and Robert had known that my real mother was alive and looking for me. They'd known that Elena was grieving and they'd done nothing. They'd let her suffer for 28 years while they raised the daughter she'd never stopped mourning. The case against them was solid. Federal prosecutors offered them a plea deal: full cooperation with the investigation in exchange for reduced sentences. Robert was ready to take it, but Margaret surprised everyone by fighting the charges. "We gave that child a good life," she told her lawyer, according to leaked court documents. "Her real mother was 19 and unmarried. We saved her from poverty and gave her opportunities she never would have had." Her defense strategy was to paint themselves as rescuers, rather than criminals, claiming they genuinely believed Elena had died in childbirth, and that they were giving an orphaned baby a loving home. But that narrative fell apart when prosecutors presented evidence that they'd been explicitly told Elena was alive and had wanted to keep me. The media attention was intense. The story had everything: baby trafficking, family secrets, corruption, and now a dramatic courtroom showdown. I found myself at the center of a national news story, fielding interview requests from major networks and newspapers. Elena and I appeared together on several shows telling our story and raising awareness about illegal adoption practices. The contrast between us was striking. She talked about me with unconditional love and pride, while footage of Margaret and Robert showed them hurrying past reporters with their lawyers refusing to comment. "I want people to understand," Elena said during one particularly powerful interview, "that this wasn't just about taking a baby. They stole 28 years of memories from both of us. They stole first steps and first words in high school graduations. They stole the chance for Aria to know her siblings, her grandparents who died without ever knowing she was alive. You can't put a price on that kind of loss." But Elena also showed remarkable grace throughout the process. When reporters asked if she was angry with me for not searching for her sooner, she was quick to defend me. "She was a victim too," Elena said firmly. "She was raised to believe these people were her parents. She was gaslit her entire life into thinking she wasn't worthy of love. The fact that she found the strength to investigate when something felt wrong shows incredible courage." As the trial date approached, more victims came forward. The investigation had identified over 60 families affected by Dr. Webb's operation. Some children had never learned the truth about their origins. Others had discovered it in various ways: through DNA testing, medical emergencies that revealed blood type inconsistencies, or deathbed confessions from guilty adoptive parents. A support group formed connecting biological parents who'd been told their children had died with adoptees who'd grown up not knowing they'd been stolen. The healing wasn't just individual, it was generational, breaking cycles of trauma and lies that had affected entire families. But for me, the most important healing was happening with Elena, Maria, and David. I was slowly learning what it felt like to be part of a family that actually wanted me around. Elena checked on me daily, not out of obligation but out of genuine care. Maria and David included me in their group chats and inside jokes. When I got a promotion at work, Elena cried with pride and called all her friends to brag about her daughter, the investigative journalist. It was everything I'd always wanted from the Blackwoods but had never received. As Margaret and Robert's trial approached, I felt ready for whatever came next. The truth was finally coming out and justice was finally being served. But I had no idea that the most shocking revelation was still to come. The trial began on a crisp October morning, almost exactly a year after that devastating family dinner that had started this entire journey. I sat in the gallery next to Elena, holding her hand as we watched Margaret and Robert Blackwood face the consequences of their decades-long deception. The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. They presented financial records showing the $75,000 payment to Dr. Webb's clinic, forged documents that had created my false identity, and testimony from other victims of the adoption ring. But the most powerful moment came when Elena took the stand to describe the impact of losing me. "I was told my daughter died in my arms," Elena testified, her voice steady but tears streaming down her face. "I grieved for 28 years, I blamed myself for not being able to protect her. I went to therapy. I took medication for depression. I struggled to bond with my other children because I was terrified something would happen to them too. These defendants didn't just steal my baby. They stole my ability to trust, to hope, to believe I deserved happiness." When it was my turn to testify, I looked directly at Margaret and Robert as I spoke. They couldn't meet my eyes. "I spent my entire childhood feeling like I was never enough," I said. "I achieved academic success, professional recognition, financial independence, but nothing I did ever made them proud. Now I understand why. I was never their daughter they were celebrating. I was evidence of their crime." Every time they looked at me, they were reminded of what they'd done. I paused, collecting my thoughts before delivering the line I'd practiced. They told me I was a burden they wanted to live without. But the real burden was their guilt, and the real life they wanted to live was one where they could forget they'd destroyed another family to create theirs. The defense tried to argue that Margaret and Robert had genuinely believed they were saving me from a difficult life, but their case crumbled when prosecutors revealed the most damning evidence yet. Hidden in Robert's office computer, investigators had found a folder of documents tracking Elena's life over the years. They'd been monitoring her. They knew when she graduated college, when she got married, when she had Maria and David. They knew she'd become a teacher, bought a house, built a stable, loving life. Exactly the kind of life where a child would have thrived. They'd known all along that their justification for taking me was a lie. Even more shocking was a draft letter Robert had written but never sent, dated just 3 months before their rejection dinner. In it, he'd considered confessing everything to me, acknowledging that they'd taken me illegally and expressing regret for the pain they'd caused. But instead of sending it, he'd decided it was easier to cut me out of their lives entirely. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours. Margaret and Robert Blackwood were found guilty on all counts: conspiracy to commit kidnapping, fraud, and racketeering. Margaret received 8 years in federal prison. Robert got 6 years plus restitution to Elena and other victims. But the real justice wasn't the prison sentences. It was the moment after the verdict, when Elena and I walked out of that courthouse together, no longer living a lie. The past year has been a journey of healing and discovery. Elena and I are building the mother-daughter relationship we should have had all along. She's teaching me family recipes that have been passed down for generations. I'm learning Spanish so I can talk to my grandmother, who cried for 3 days straight when Elena told her I was alive. Maria and David have become the siblings I never knew I wanted. We text constantly, plan trips together, and they've made it their mission to catch me up on 28 years of family stories. David even moved to New York for college, partly so we could spend more time together. The financial restitution from the Blackwoods went toward establishing a foundation that helps families affected by illegal adoption. Elena and I run it together, providing legal support and counseling for people trying to reconnect with stolen or missing family members. My journalism career has taken an unexpected turn too. The investigation that started with my own story has led to a book deal and a documentary series about illegal adoption practices. I'm using my platform to advocate for adoption reform and help other families find the truth about their origins. But perhaps the most meaningful change is simply knowing what it feels like to be truly loved and accepted. Elena tells me she's proud of me, not because of what I've accomplished, but because of who I am. She says I'm not a burden, I'm a gift she thought she'd lost forever. The Blackwoods sent letters from prison asking for forgiveness, claiming they'd only wanted to give me a good life. I haven't responded. Some betrayals are too deep for forgiveness, and some truths come too late to matter. As I wrap up this story, I'm sitting in Elena's kitchen helping her prepare Sunday dinner for our family. Maria and David are arguing over what movie we're going to watch later, and Elena is humming while she cooks the same song she used to sing when she was pregnant with me. This is what family is supposed to feel like. Not perfect but real. Not conditional but unconditional. Not a burden but a blessing. So here's my question for all of you watching. Have you ever had a moment where someone's cruelty actually led to the best thing that ever happened to you? When what felt like the worst betrayal turned into the greatest gift, Elena? And I want to know. Because sometimes the universe has a funny way of bringing justice and healing into our lives, even when it takes 28 years to arrive. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think about family loyalty, justice, or the power of truth, please let us know in the comments below. Share your own experiences with family karma. The good, the bad, and the unexpected. Hit that like button if you believe in the power of truth to heal even the deepest wounds, and subscribe for more stories about justice served and families reunited. From Elena and me to all of you, thank you for being part of this journey. Thank you for believing that everyone deserves to know where they come from and that love, real love, is never conditional. May you find your truth, your justice, and your real family, whatever form that takes. And remember, sometimes the people who reject you are doing you the biggest favor of your life. They're making room for the people who will love you exactly as you are.